our first question is how to balance driving outcomes for the customer versus outcomes for the company.
So I guess this really depends on sort of the size of the company that you're in, I think really the business you're in as well. I think in the end, the key concept of value streams and products is that there's always a customer. And then, say you're in a very large enterprise, oftentimes that customer might actually be internal to the organization. If you're building software for managing a plant, or you're building software for an investment platform or a healthcare platform, that customer will often be internal. In some cases, the customer, if it's actually a platform components that you're building, that customer might even be another set of development teams who are leveraging APIs or services from the platform. So I think that the key thing that the product, and the flow framework suggests is just to be very clear and explicit about that. So that those top right parts of the flow framework really are about making sure that you define what the value component is. And that will depend on where that product value stream lives. Is that product value stream something that delivers value specifically to an external customer, to a consumer, to a business partner, something of that sort? Is it something that's consumed internally? And the key thing is that it is actually explicitly defined so that you know that your efforts on increasing the value that you deliver, so increasing throughput, so increasing flow velocity, reducing flow time, actually help drive the outcome for that customer. Now, the whole goal is, of course, overall, we're delivering value to the company, to the customer, to the market. But the key thing around these value streams is to have another layer over top of the team layer, over top of that layer of your agile teams, this value stream layer, this team of teams layer, so that every single value stream knows exactly who they're delivering value to. So that when you've got teams making decisions, they're doing their release planning, they're doing their PI planning, they're doing some sprint planning or readjusting something on the fly, or maybe they're working more Kanban, more flow-based orientation already. They actually are able to prioritize based on what value they do need to deliver to that customer. So just as as a few examples, if you've got that value metric, and this is why lately as I've seen I'm going to just take a brief tangent here, and there are some questions related to this that we can answer as well. But as I've seen objectives and key results, OKRs, for example, are how we do this at Tasktop, how we specify for each value stream what that value component is. So if it's something that's a customer-facing product, that's very easy. Things are like retention, how much customers are renewing the product, active usage of the product, net promoter score. Those are common value metrics for a value stream, a product value stream. That's where you've got an external customer. For internal value streams, if it might be a platform team, some of their SLAs, their uptime, their own if a team's producing an API, the internal consumption of that API, those all become key value metrics. So the key thing is, and we can definitely dig into this further if there are other questions on it, but the point of the flow framework is that is well defined so that every single person working on that value stream knows what metric they're working to, what they want to improve. And is this metric something that's, and of course the whole point of those metrics is they're based on results, they're not based on activities. So that those results, and sometimes they're not easy, right? If it's for some of these internal systems that we work on, these internal value streams, I see many cases where they've never been defined, right? No one's actually known exactly who their customer is because all this work has been passed on to them, again, by being kind of thrown over the fence, which of course makes it then very difficult for the teams to make some autonomous decisions on how to best deliver on what's actually being asked for. But the key thing is just as well as you can, always specify who the customer is, what the outcome you're driving for is, which through systems like OKRs, you would do on a quarterly basis, let's say. And then the whole point is that the flow metric, you're measuring the flow metrics to see how you're driving to that outcome. So for example, increasing flow velocity, you're always measuring, well, as we're delivering more and more features to the customer or delivering a better experience through quality improvements, as quality improved, did our retention go up? Were customers leaving us because there were so many defects? Or even internally, were people not moving on to the new internal system because it kept failing them? Or were they not adopting the new API because it wasn't as good as the old API, or things of that sort, right? So that you can you realize, and then this is the whole point of the flow metrics, is that they're this leading indicator on what's driving value to the company, or to the customer. And so that you can see, for example, when we did deliver more features, well, our net promoter scores did go up. So it looks like we're designing the right things. It looks like we've got the right market fit for this particular thing. So that's really the core thing, is to always be very deliberate about who you're delivering value to, have that set for each value stream, and then make sure that as you increase flow, as you look at delivering more quickly, more safely, that's reflected in those business metrics, those business results. So yeah, I think the key thing is, as you get to larger and larger companies, of course, this tends to be a bit simpler, where you've got a more direct mapping between the value streams and customers in a small organization, smaller business units and the like. But as you get into larger organizations, of course, you're looking at 70–80% of the value streams delivering to some internal capability, not something direct to a customer. So it's really important to make this distinction. And then the key advice I have on this is to make sure that you treat those internal value streams, the value streams with internal customers, the value streams with developers or other technologists as your customers, to be as much first class as the ones delivering to customers, and to have those value metrics, the flow metrics, and the roadmaps specified.
Great. We had a couple questions come in via the chat, Mik. One is regarding professional services and delivering programs for other people, delivering their dev value stream, and how to map the value stream so that ops value streams is the same as a dev value stream. But again, it is the other way around. Do we have any case for professional services value streams?
This is another, I think, really good question. And Laurel, we should make sure to put this one on the Flow Framework FAQ on flowframework.org if we don't have it. This does come up a lot. And the bottom line is if you've got, so the way that work enters the value stream is one of sort of the key constraints in terms of how that value stream functions, right? So if you've got a professional services value stream, of course, I'll use the example of when the professional, there are organizations out there, that I've worked with, who have sort of very agile professional services delivery. When really work enters, it's reprioritized and the like. Yvonne, maybe at C Prime, I imagine you do have customers who more think this way, but it's never it's never perfect, right? So let's take the most problematic, or not kind of most traditional waterfall ones, where you've got all this work that's defined and passed on to you, and then you actually have a big set of requirements for a whole bunch of dev work, and then a completely separate set of maintenance and operations work, and a separate staff, or maybe the operations is being done by some other organization and the like. So there, the bottom line is that the way the work has been structured is very much through a project mentality, right? That things, rather than things being very iterative and dev and ops working together, and there being room to reprioritize and shift and pivot as you learn, that's not there, right? The work's been structured basically in a project mindset. So in those scenarios, I think that when you're looking at the organization where you have control, because chances are you don't have control outside of that in terms of the work, the way that the work has come in from the client and it has been specified. The key thing is to just basically within whatever your sphere of control is there, to still set up as stable as possible a product value stream, and to give that product value stream as wide a span of delivery as you can. So you might actually bring in some of the people who interface directly with the client. They should be part of the value stream, right? Scopes will change at some point. There's going to be something that goes sideways, or the client's going to have some more needs that came up mid-release cycle or something of that sort. So still try to structure as stable as value stream as you can. Of course, the challenge with some of those professional services is that the dependencies get very problematic, right? If you've got a dependency on ops or an infrastructure, that really can unfortunately be structured as very external to the value stream, although we know we want it as part of it. So just be aware of basically what the limit. You've basically got a subset of the value stream that you're optimizing for, but for that, still measure flow. And what you'll see, for example, and what you'll be able to communicate to the client is that, the same problem that we see in even well-structured value stream, is that one of your biggest problems is dependencies, right? If you've got all these dependencies waiting for the ops team from their side, or a separate ops team somewhere else, well, that's what's blocking your flow. And it allows you to actually make the same kind of case that you make within an organization, who, by the way, still has problems with silos. Like they'll often be in ops silos, just within the same organization. Just chances are it's separated off, and there isn't a great flow. And again, it's not treated as part of a single value stream. So you're still able, as part of the planning and as part of the work with the client, I think, to make the same case, is that our biggest bottleneck is waiting on infrastructure. Our biggest bottleneck is waiting on ops. Our biggest bottleneck is waiting on environments. That's what's impeding the flow of these 18 features that you wanted 2 weeks ago. And we can't take on more flow load. We can't take on more WIP without slowing our entire engagement, our entire project down, unless we actually address that bottleneck. So I think the key thing is still use the flow metrics, use them to identify bottlenecks. And so often when projects are structured in this way in professional services, you'll end up with the bottlenecks being external to what you control. But again, make that case, because it helps set expectations and indicate where the entire project might get delayed or is at risk.
Excellent. So talking more about those value streams, we did have several people ask about specifically transitioning to product value streams and how you get started with a product-based mentality, and what is the foundation for pivot from project to product, if you could go more into that.
Yeah, so that kind of question goes a bit back to basics. I think the key thing is the product's got a customer, and a value stream is how you deliver to the customer. And when we're building software, value streams are people. So you've got a team, you've got a set of teams, and what we know from the way work like team topologies is the more stable those teams are, the better they get at delivering that value to the customer. And so fundamentally, what you want is basically each team assigned to a single value stream, and delivering for basically 1 to 10 teams for each value stream, and each of them delivering product to some customer. Now that product can be, an internal service, again, an API, in maintenance. It can be maintenance improvements to an old system that you keep 2 teams on, right? But those teams are dedicated to that, rather than having 3 or 4 different teams who are working on it part-time. You've got dedicated teams, and you might actually create a value stream. By the way, this is a good practice that I see, of all of your basically maintenance and end-of-life products, right? Where these teams are actually maintaining a portfolio of multiple, 10, 20 different applications. But the whole point is you really think of establishing these clear, stable value streams for the entire portfolio, making sure that they can pull work in, and each one of them, again, has a roadmap, has their value stream defined, has their flow metrics measured, and knows who their customer and what business results they're planning, they're working towards, right? Let's say you've got one of your value streams which is handling the end-of-life applications, or the applications that are in maintenance mode. You just might want, the fewest defects, the fewest outages, and some new functionally added to move customers to the newer systems, to the cloud-based systems, or something else of that sort. So I think the key thing is to understand, and to not completely over fixate of exactly how the application portfolio maps those value streams, but really to understand what are the teams, what's the structure, what work are they doing, and then for that structure, just to start measuring the flow metrics, because once you start measuring the flow metrics, you'll see how these dependencies between teams are, as even in the professional services scenario, but in most scenarios that we see, become some of the main things they have to manage, right? So it's what I've seen in terms of a failure mode is a company will spend 6 months trying to figure out exactly what's the what is the product portfolio, what are our products, how does our suite of 2,000 applications map onto those products, and how do the teams map on the rest. But if you instead just try to define, based again less on the application portfolio, more on what the teams are, what the product value streams that you have are, start measuring the flow metrics and start looking at dependencies, you'll see, okay, we've completely ignored these backend services, these APIs, and we should really start treating that one team as a separate independent product value stream, because so many things depend on them. And maybe we should really look at over the next 6 months, adding a second team to that value stream so that we can move that faster, because it's the bottleneck. And you won't really see that when you're just looking top down as the challenge, right? When you're just looking at what the business facing, the customer facing products are, you need sort of a view of the basically all of the work being done. And so again, starting with exactly what you've got today, measuring what you've got today and looking at the flow metrics, and then incrementally building out what the product portfolio is from that, I think is a much more effective way to do it.
Great. And Furquan just asked in the chat, can a product have multiple value streams, or is it just one value stream per product?
Yeah, so that's really up to what the size and shape of your product portfolio. So you can have absolutely I think at the simplest way of looking at it, you've basically got these agile teams, maybe feature teams, however you structure your teams. Above that, you've got product value streams, there's 1 to 10 of those. Above that, you've got programs or product lines or product domains or whatever you call them. So if you've got a significant web property, yes, it might be composed of 10 different products, right? But the key thing is to think of, we really want to think of it as these layers, which then map onto your release trains, because you want as simple a structure as possible. Because again, the hardest things to manage is the dependencies between those value streams. If you don't have the value streams defined, you'll end up with all these interdependencies between all the teams, which is even harder to manage, right? Like you now have a much harder dependency matrix to manage. But if you really formalize that product value stream, that team of teams concept, you'll then actually start looking at, okay, what can this product value stream deliver? How do we allow it to move as fast as it can with as few dependencies as possible on other product value streams, right? What services and APIs do we need for that? What do we need from our build pipelines for that? And then yes, if you've got really large products that you deliver, then they will absolutely be supported by multiple product value streams. And then from a, let's say, a marketing or a customer point of view, you might call that thing one product. So what you call it in the end is really up to you. But it will have key parts of functionality supported by different product value streams. So
hi. It's Alex calling from London. Can I ask a question? Apologies
Please,
about the silhouette. Yeah. So I've got your book. I've not completely read it yet, and I was looking for a bit of guidance. So this is super interesting. I'm working on a very large global program, digital transformation. We've got teams all over the world. It's very divergent in terms of ways of working and practices and all this. It's got all of the sort of ingredients of sort of the pain points you can imagine. Where do I start in terms of like measuring value and flow? Because I'm just wondering what are the sort of hooks that I need to sort of like start measuring in order to bring some of these metrics to life?
Yeah, so I think the key thing again is the realization that you've got the value streams exist. People are doing work today, right? They're there. So as you get further into the book, Alex, I think it goes into why the different flow metrics are important. But I'll give you just one example, and I think what I actually think is a really great place to start. So just take flow time. And if your organization is trying to innovate and it's trying to move faster, all that matters, if your organization is moving to cloud, right? If you're trying to create novel systems of engagement, all that really matters is that you've got fast flow time, which is your fast time to value for anything that that you're delivering, right? You could have the greatest kind of user experience design and dashboards and screens in the world, but if your bottleneck is not that it takes 3 months to get them to a customer and then get another month to get feedback to the design team and to iterate, well, you're never going to be able to innovate at the speed of a company who's got that feedback cycle in days. So the key thing is basically, you look at what's there, you look at your value stream. Let's take, I don't know, and you start somewhere, right? You can start, just take your part of your mobile, your web, your new greenfields application portfolio, or even an older part of your portfolio, and just start measuring flow time. And for that, at that team of teams level, and the key thing is that flow time is different than just measuring agile metrics, right? Or just measuring the DevOps DORA metrics. Flow time is how long it took from when work entered the value stream to when you had value to the customer. So typically flow time will be from when any human in your organization started working on it. So when a designer started designing an experience, that's when work started. Yeah. And that designer is not happy and the business is not happy until the customer's got in their hands. And of course, they've got feedback on it. So the number one step is just to measure the flow time, because usually when we do that with large organizations, you've got flow time that's measured in weeks and sometimes months. To create innovative user experiences, we know you need a flow time that's under 2 weeks. It's got to be measured in days, because you need that fast feedback, right? Ideally, you get to the point where you've got A/B testing and so on. Don't necessarily need to start there, but at least you need that fast flow and feedback. And then you can set this organizational goal saying, if we want to, and I'm still using that same example, if we want to create, first great experiences, great mobile experiences, great web experiences for our customers, we need to shorten flow time to be days. And that's how we'll actually get, unlock all the power that we've invested in, let's say, in design, in user experience, and actually turn that into customer value. So it's interesting. It's actually similar for all sorts, not just the design aspects of these applications, but for all sorts of things. So I recently wrote there's some collaboration here with other people from the DevOps Empire Summit community, but measuring your move to cloud with just one metric. This came from Cloud for CEOs by Adrian Cockcroft. He actually said in that white papers, all that matters is your time to innovation, your flow time, right? That's why cloud's beneficial, because it allows organizations, especially the cloud native ones, to iterate very quickly and pivot as they need to understand what creates a better user experience, what creates stickier users, what drives more revenue, what drives more value to the business. So yeah, Alex, I don't know if that makes sense. Happy to take a follow-up on that as well. But yeah, just pick a flow metric. In the case where it's around customer value, around cloud, flow time is the first one. Measure it, and then help make the case to the organizations. We have to shorten this to be measured in days.
Okay, cool. No, it makes sense. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Awesome. We have a few more questions that have come in via the chat. Next one is from Matt Ring. He asks, can you speak more to patterns or anti-patterns of digital product organizations measuring lead time when end customer first asks for it versus flow time when work is accepted by the product team? How does product discovery play into this when determining whether the request should be built?
Yeah, so I think this is a really important distinction, which it took me quite a while to wrap my head around. I was looking at, what has made manufacturing organizations great, right? What makes a BMW or a Tesla? What do they optimize for? And they optimize. It looks externally for Gene make this point, and we discussed this with him at length. It looks like they're always optimizing for lead time, right? And we've got and when you relate this to DevOps, right? In Agile, you've got code to commit to code deploy time. Those are the accelerate, the DORA to sell metrics. Those are important if your bottleneck is in your CI/CD pipeline, right? But the point that Gene was making with the Phoenix project and with a lot of the DevOps work is fundamentally it's about flow and feedback, and it's about end to end. And then if the example that he was often giving was look at how Toyota optimizes for lead time, because lead time is the time from when you ordered your car to when you received it, right? So it's from customer request to value delivered. And then I was initially working the flow metrics all around lead time. I was going like, wait a second, this doesn't quite match up to what I see within Tasktop, to what I see within large organizations, even within open source projects and startups, because the interesting thing is our backlogs are massive. Like we're never delivering on all those cars. It's just not going to happen. Like, you've got tech giants with literally millions of items on their backlog that they'll never deliver. Like Apple's Radar bug tracker has a lot of things Apple never ever plans to deliver to any of us. So, or who are using their devices. So then I realized that actually this was not a new problem at all. This is Dominica de Grandes actually wrote this up in her book, which is the first place I saw it. But then reading the lean literature, I realized, well, of course, in lean manufacturing, they're very deliberate about the difference between lead time and flow time. And I think that difference is even more significant in software, because a car manufacturer, they will deliver every car that's ordered. And again, we will deliver, I don't know, 5% of our backlogs over the next 3 years, right? And of course, backlog grooming and understanding what the highest value things are really key. So flow time starts when, and of course, you define it for your organization, or at least in our implementation, in Tasktop's implementation of the flow framework, you actually define the workflow state when flow time starts, right? But that's conceptually the flow framework is the same. It's when you've taken something off the backlog and someone's doing some business analysis, some design, having some meetings, some conversations, basically when it's been taken off the backlog and it's being looked at, even if you might not actually finish it, by the way, I'll get to that point in a second. When a human has in your organization has started working on it, flow time starts. Because what we want to optimize, and it's the same thing with manufacturing, in the manufacturing, you want to optimize from when the car order came into the plant to when the plant was, to when basically when the car was delivered, right? So that is flow time, right? Because we need to know exactly how long that takes, and there's a bunch of cycle times within there, the different steps. So design is a there are design cycles in there, there are development cycles in there, there are release management and operations cycles in there, and those are all sort of important stages. There's the code commit to code deploy and the rest. So what we really want to optimize for is when work started to when work was delivered. And if we're optimizing flow time, that's how we will increase throughput. That's how we will increase the speed of innovation. We need to understand our lead times. We need to understand if we've got customers who have 100 unresolved defects and 20 feature requests, right? It's still important to understand the size of our backlogs and the lead time on those things. But what we want to optimize our value stream flow is flow time, because fundamentally optimizing for flow time is how we will work those backlogs off as quickly as we can. It's basically kind of widening the value stream to take in as much work and deliver it as easily and effectively and ideally as joyfully as possible. I think the other key thing to understand around this, the concept of flow time, then I'm sorry, it's now escaping me, this second aspect of this question, but I think the key thing is we need to, it has to be measured basically across different tools, right? If we're just getting that view within one of the silos, we're not getting the customer perspective on it. So even though it's flow time, even though it's not from the request, it has to be from the customer's point of view as we started. And of course, oftentimes what will happen is it'll be now on the release plan, it'll be on the PI plan, and the customer will know it's coming. It'll be actually told to an external customer or an internal stakeholder. So it's signal at that point that it's coming. And actually, car manufacturers do the same thing. They will tell you, if you ordered a car, your car order is now being processed, and to when it's delivered. So it's still, I want to make it clear that it still needs to be very much customer centric, because products and value streams are about flow and pull. So it still is, flow time is still a customer centric metric, not an internal team centric metric. Where, for example, the DORA metrics, they're super important metrics for a set of teams, but they're not customer centric.
I had a quick question, if I could sneak it in, please. And this was in the context of a large program. And I was wondering what Mike's thoughts are on the project has, the large program has some tight timelines and deadlines associated with that, but it's structured so that it's not going to meet it. It's currently in a water scrum fall model, where you have the front end piece done waterfall, there's a little bit of an agile team set up, and then the back end is all waterfall. So wondering how have there been cases where, without going for a company-wide sort of implementation of the flow framework and value streams, have there been specific transitions from large programs to start working from program mode to product mode, and how to set up value streams associated with that? Yeah,
and this is actually related to the question at the start. So I'll give a concrete example. One of our customers who spoke about this, it's Laurel can point to the webinar after, but it's Cubic, which does transformation systems for cities, right? So when you tap your card in Chicago and London, that's Cubic's IT and hardware systems that are working. So as you can imagine, cities like Chicago don't operate agile in the same way that we might want to. So these are in those kinds of programs, and those are basically 10-year projects you have with a city with a set of requirements. And so no matter what, I think we can and should complain about it and look for better ways of doing it, but we're stuck in water scrum fall. We're just stuck, because that's how the work came in. And so within that scrum part, within that middle part, I think the key thing is to establish and define these clear value streams. Because the challenge is, for example, let's say you've got this large program, you realize you need to build some platform components first, or you realize you've got some technical debt that the customer system had, or that some old databases or whatever it was, that's going to derail everything. And of course, none of that tech debt was ever considered when the requirements were defined, right? Because what project plan has reduced tech debt on it? They just don't. So the key thing is still define those value streams, still understand what your dependencies are, because you'll see that you've got these problematic dependencies on legacy systems, on technical debt, on the need to build out, to spend more time or resources building out a common platform, that multiple aspects of this massive program might need to consume. And again, that common platform was never properly scoped or defined. But you don't want to build 3 of them as part of this large program. You need one. You want one view of customers. You want a common set of services and APIs and the like. So I think the key thing is within that, within the part that you're delivering, again, define the product value streams, understand the dependencies, and in the end, as you're redefining scope, you say, no, we are basically, if we don't invest in a single set of APIs here, this will get delayed even further. Whereas if we delay up front, invest in this common platform components, invest in reducing some of the tech debt that you've been building up over the last 15 years, then we actually will have more upfront delays, but better flow going forward. So I think still take that economic model of product value streams where the dependencies will be, because again, you already know, it sounds like, where the delays will come from, and then make the economic case to invest, usually just to invest earlier in reducing that for faster delivery and fewer delays down the line. And I'm in no way trying to say this is easy, but again, I think at least inside, take that view of product value streams and flow, because fundamentally it will help deliver on the program. So.
Our next question from the chat is: do you recognize the difference between value streams and value chains in your approach, or is there a value index applied as in a financial arena?
Yeah, so I think, and this is part of the challenge on the terminology. So I think the flow framework definitely takes a specific view on it. I think value chains are a good concept. I think they do get used somewhat interchangeably with value streams as well. But I think the key thing is that you've got, the way I find it easier to distill, and the way that's really the flow framework approaches is, again, you've got people and teams. That's what's doing the work. There's not robots, automations in your CI/CD pipeline are not doing the work. It's actually people and teams doing the work. Sometimes they will be external, right? You'll have contractors, you'll have people outside your company, you'll have dependencies on another part of the company. So you really do have this, in the end, as it's a value. That's why we call it a value stream network, because you've got all these dependencies. And so you're trying to optimize for value stream flow, which is, again, where you've got a well-defined customer, you've got a well-defined internal or external, you've got well-defined business metrics that you want to affect and deliver on. For that value stream, you want to make the value streams as dependent as possible. But what it is a value stream network. And it's not a chain, because it's not like links in a chain. You don't break one link and all of a sudden nothing works, right? It's a network, so it's got some resilience. If one contractor goes away, you get another contractor. If one team, if everyone's been moved off to another project, you've got teams working around it. So I think the key thing is, they're not chains, they're not linear. What we have in software is these value stream networks. We need to manage their dependencies. We need to treat them. I think the concept of thinking of them as a supply chain is still right. And supply chains are networks as well, of course. They're not simple chains. And so, basically understand them, trying to optimize for flow for a value stream, understand that the dependencies make it a network, minimize the dependencies, and then you optimize flow in the network.
Great.
Can I ask one?
Yeah, Fabio, sure.
Thank you. Well, when I look at the flow framework, I see the connection between the value streams, right? The value stream networks. And when I look at SAFe, for example, we also have the value streams, and for the development value streams, we split them down in agile release trains, right? Some value streams can have one agile release train, some can have multiple, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes I think that the concept of the agile release train is very much close to the concept of the value stream.
Yeah.
It has a value definition. It has people working on that. It has a client, right? So is it okay if I understand that the ART is kind of a value stream as well?
Yeah, Fabio, I personally prefer that simpler view, right? That you've got, so again, value streams are a team of team levels construct. You've got agile teams, you've got value streams, and value streams have release trains. And it's actually, I find it effective when those three things are aligned, because fundamentally what you're doing then is you're aligning what you're delivering in terms of like, to the company, to the customer, to the business. You're aligning that to your org chart, and then to basically to your pipeline and release trains. And so it's just that it's a simpler structure, and you're not wondering about the mappings between those things. So I actually think it's like you're suggesting. I actually think that's an effective pattern, is that to have those things lined up. And if you look at a tech company, it's interesting, right? Because their operational value stream, their business value stream, and their delivery pipeline, so their release trains, they do tend to be, and their org chart, they tend to be lined up. It's kind of one-to-one. So I think, of course, that's often not the starting point, but that's why the flow framework kind of directionally suggests the simpler approach is to move to those things being aligned. And it's not to say you have to start there today, but in my experience, it's simpler when all of those things are aligned into one structure. So,
all right.
And yeah, we really do want, because in the end, again, the goal is to maximize flow of value stream, to minimize the dependencies everyone working the value stream has on others. You always have dependencies, but you want to be able to work as efficiently without being stuck. The whole point is that in terms of flow is any wait states are the kiss of death, right? They're what slows things down. They're what introduces WIP and too much flow load. So, and the wait states tend to come from dependencies external to the value stream, like the client changing, professional service scenario, changing priorities, changing scope or something, like another team being behind on what they were meant to deliver, or them changing priorities, like dependencies on too many teams. So we want to minimize the wait states. Everyone's happier, the less they're waiting on others, the less that they're stuck. And we want to make sure that, of course, within that, you can deploying independently. If you're depending on someone else to deploy, that's another dependency, right? That's another wait states. That's another integration exercise that takes time and introduces wait states. Whereas if everyone every value stream can deploy independently, has their own release train they have control over, well, guess what? That tends to increase flow. So I agree, Fabio.
Hi, I was wondering if I could jump in and ask a question. I am in the early stages, so just identifying our backlog. Very interesting with 4 flow items, how many different interpretations people are coming up with. So I'm using the flow chart in the book. And I was wondering, since we're not manufacturing, if you could give me another term I could use other than pulled by. I was using requested by, and I just want to make sure that that's okay with you.
I mean, I think one line is use what your organization, because I think every organization has some of its own language, some of its own culture, and the rest. I think use whatever, and kind of language and culture obviously are intertwined. So use what works.
Okay.
I think the key thing is the concept of pull, in my opinion, is a really important one, because it makes you think more about what value you're trying to deliver, and there's a constant pull from what you're trying to deliver, right? And that pull often is in terms of what was put on the roadmap. But if we just think of roadmaps for their own sake, we're forgetting that really want to prioritize, use things like weighted shortage of first and such to deliver as much as possible to this constant pull from the customer. So, okay. And I think requested by is fine, right? Okay. Because requested by encompasses the concept of pull. And I think the key point with the flow items is you will have people, and I think organizations have very rich taxonomies of how they've basically broken down their different issue types, their work items, have Jira, Azure DevOps, these other tools are all configured to represent what kind of thing people need to work on and where in the software architecture it lies. The point of the flow items is just to abstract above that. So you stop having discussions with teams saying, well, is this kind of enabler, is this kind of tech debt work, what is it, how do you break it down, and so on, to say, and just to tell to them, it's like, no, you're doing tech debt work, you specify which of that tech debt work maps into the debt item, which maps into features, because we can have endless debates on it, but fundamentally, whether you're actually reducing tech debt with this work or whether you're adding a whole interesting new feature. And sometimes it'll be different for different teams, right?
Mhm.
Like the risks, right? If you've got a team who's doing front-end mobile, security work should go under risks. They're reducing the risk of the application. If you've got a authentication and security team making a framework, well, all these cool security features they're adding to make logging and authentication easier, well, those tend to be features, right? That then get consumed by others who are reducing risk with that. So I think the thing is, the teams know, and the way that they're working today already maps into the flow items. It might change over time, but in practice with our customers, we don't even see it changing quickly over time. It kind of shifts slowly over time. What we discover is that they tend not to, and because it hasn't been as prominent in the Agile frameworks, teams tend to need to be pushed some to make their risk work and their debt work more explicit. But again, they're doing it. It's somewhere in their work item hierarchy.
So I think you just answered my next question. Some people are getting a little confused between debt and a defect. So if, say, someone created an error versus a dev versus a customer, they want to identify the customer error as debt. When I'm saying an error is an error,
And there's an error.
it doesn't
Okay,
matter.
that one's more clear. Yeah.
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 It's the
Whether
customer
it's an
experience that's
incident,
affected.
It's an error.
Okay.
All those are defects.
Got it.
That's now, I think it's important. It's how technical debts arise, right? Technical debts come from taking a shortcut to get something delivered faster, usually, right? It's shortcuts that we take that we want to pay down later. We did something more quickly, and we know that having done it more quickly means we actually should have used a newer component, a newer API. We should have actually extracted a common, put in place some better modularity. So the tech debts. So I think anything that's any kind of error of that sort, as you said, that's a defect. That's
okay.
it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and then anything that involves improving the software or the infrastructure or process to increase future flow is debt work, is debt reduction. Because debt reduction, it also needs a purpose as well, right? It needs a business, and that's the whole point of the flow framework, is we need an economic model for why on earth we do debt work, because certainly the customer doesn't see it, right? Customers don't care if we do tech debt work. They don't see any benefit from it. All they see is that organizations that invest in tech debt seem to deliver more value to the customer down the road, because of course, reducing tech debt makes it easier to build new functionality and new features when you do it the right way. So I think that tech debt, all the debts are investments in increasing feature flow by improving the, again, architecture, process, infrastructure, and the like.
Thank you.
How do enterprise functions such as finance, marketing, et cetera, relate to product value streams?
So this again depends on the size of the organization. Frankly, in large organizations, this is not a great answer. I'm going to just say they don't. But really, you want to bring as much into the value stream as possible, right? So the closer, the first step tends to be bringing business into the value stream, right? So bringing the business analysts, the product managers, the people who sit into the line of business to become a part of the value stream. So they're part of the flow and the feedback loop. Because of course the problem is when the business counterparts are just dumping work onto technology and IT teams, you have a dysfunctional value stream. You're gonna have this one-way flow with no feedback. And we know how well that works, right? And things like technical debt work will never get scheduled in that scenario. So you want to, again, elevate, and this is where the flow metrics can be very useful. You actually make sure as part of, and planning processes, like in safe PI planning, they're great for that, right? Because what you can then make the case is, if we don't reduce this tech debt in this release cycle, we're going to impede our future flow. You'll get even less than you've been getting now, and you're already complaining that you're not getting enough, and you're always changing scope on us because you're not. So the key thing is that you want to bring all those business counterparts in, and of course, then that actually ends up connecting you up to say the marketing functions, because fundamentally marketing is, in many cases, is waiting to announce that next set of features, and would love, they want that deadline. They want to know when it's coming. They want to build their campaigns around it, and they want those sorts of things. So I think the key thing is to just expand what the value stream is, and you'll naturally actually start bringing in those functions, because whether it's indirectly through business counterparts and product managers, or more directly, again, everyone is wanting to get behind bringing these great new offerings or capabilities to market. So I think the key thing is absolutely think about them more broadly, but the way you do that is, again, by expanding the scope of the value stream so everyone's on board with all the different flow items being delivered. So then finance, to answer that question, I think that one's absolutely key, right? Finance, the main thing is all that finance is seeing from software teams right now and from software organizations right now is typically just costs, is what the headcounts are, what the spend is, what the infrastructure costs are, what the hosting costs are, and the rest. And the finance people I've worked with and organizations, extremely large all the way to small, they want a measure of value, right? They want to know that all this cost is producing more value to the organization, to the company, to the customer. So they can be a really great advocate for this transformation, because the key thing is in terms of kind of that top right of the flow framework, the business metrics, they understand those business metrics, right? They help the organizations produce a lot of those business metrics, like pipeline conversions and revenue and retention and the like. And what the flow metrics are, again, is a leading indicator of those. So they actually get to see, well, when we put in more R&D dollars, when spent went up, we actually got more value out because we accelerated flow, right? So that's again, getting the flow metrics, much the way in manufacturing, the finance people very much care about what the flow time is of a plant, right? Because they very much care the next time someone says, well, we're going to make a new plant and it's going to have a 10-second lower. So not, well, if we're doing the whole flow time, so there's the takt time, there's each step, but let's say we're going to take the flow time from in that plant from 8 hours to 7 hours. We'll find, you've got finance people listening, and the key thing is to expose the economics of software, where faster flow means better company outcomes, to finance to make them your champion. And again, that going back to the example earlier is showing that you can reduce flow time for, let's say, feature delivery from 2 months to 2 weeks. That's the amount of productivity improvement that unlocks is just incredible. So, and of course, in different organizations, this is part of the reasons for the flow items, right? Maybe finance is more concerned about the fact that customers are being lost. So you actually want to show that you can accelerate defect work and reduce errors. With that, let's say, without increasing headcount, by focusing on the flow of those. So then you make that economic case. And I think the key thing is, or risk reduction, right? Oftentimes, if an organization has had security incidents and the like, finance would love to hear that there's focus on risk work, and that it's not just being done through kind of better analysis and vulnerability detection, but actually accelerating how quickly we're addressing security vulnerabilities. So, and even debts, right? Then this is the interesting thing, is I've absolutely seen finance champion tech debt investment, because they've seen delivery slow as costs go up, which is kind of, they would like to see the opposite, right? You've got a CFO at a car plant. They want to see that if they're spending more on the plants, they're getting more cars, not fewer. And of course, tech debts work in the way of that. And with the flow framework, you've got a way of unwinding it, saying, well, we actually have to remove that tech debt, put in place more automation in order to make sure that we can scale our software capabilities. So yeah, I think the key thing is, do bring, make the value streams as broad as you can, but that can take time, and just start somewhere. It's okay if you start them more narrowly, but fundamentally they should stretch all the way to marketing, and then yeah, just make finance your ally, because again, so often they want to help, or at least they want to support any effort around gaining more visibility into the flow of value than they're getting today.
Brandon asks, how can you prove that reducing technical debt will improve the flow without actually doing the work?
You can't. That's a really good question. So that's why this is, I think the flow framework is about, this is a complex dynamic system. So it's, rather than trying to prove it to it's like putting like a 10-page business case on on an epic, right? Can you really prove that doing that one epic really delivered that entire business case? No, there's all these interdependent pieces and so on, right? The way the flow framework works is it looks at these things in aggregate. So when the team the team did its release plan, its PI planning, there was 22% of the capacity actually went into finally resolving all these tech debts. Then after, you should measure the increase in flow. And by the way, that will help focus the teams as well on doing the right kinds of tech debt work. Because if everyone's focused on making it easier to put more interactive widgets on the screen and reducing the tech debt that's impeding that, well, guess what? Next release cycle, it'll be easier to put those widgets on the screens. So I think the key thing is it has to be proven empirically. Measure it with either flow velocity and flow time of features, right? Because fundamentally, all that people will care about is, did the tech debt reduction increase our future feature flow velocity? So at Tasktop, we tech debt work always comes with a hypothesis of increasing feature flow within 3 to 6 months. And if you've got, you might have massive old platforms where it takes more than 3 to 6 months, but the shorter you can make it, the more incremental the wins and flow, again, the better and the more support for you get to see. Because the thing that makes people's eyes glaze over is like, well, we need 18 months to reduce the tech debt on this platform. You won't see anything until you get that. So yeah, just try to make it the case for those improvements as incremental as possible and measure them with typically just with flow velocity or flow time.
Mik, do you have any thoughts around planned business value versus actual business value after PI planning?
Yeah. So again, I think it's important, and this is where the flow framework, which measures flow, and the flow metrics are, which was absolutely amazing to see that they're now part of the safe metrics. So if you just Google for safe metrics, you'll see the article. So the key thing is, the scaled agile framework is, a lot of it is around prioritizing and planning work and tracking that, right? Keep in mind the flow framework is just about measuring value streams. That's it. So it doesn't help you prioritize that at all. It just shows you, basically it shows you what flowed and what the outcomes of that were. And then it connects that to these business results, so that improve a business result or did it not. So just separate those things: the planned business value, the prioritization, using story points, using weighted shortest job first. Those are all things that are key to safe, because it supports your planning, and they don't exist in the flow framework. The flow framework just measures the actual flow of value streams and connects that to business results and to customers. So bottom line is, you need both, and then use the flow framework in terms of what the actuals were. So did we actually, when that PI was done, did we see flow increase? Did we see a net promoter score for a customer improve?
Mik, the question is, how is Tasktop incorporating OKRs to drive outcomes versus output? And how are you aligning OKRs within the organization?
Yeah, so you can, if you go to project.org, under speaking, you'll actually see my keynote from DevOps Enterprise Summit a couple of weeks ago is actually on there. You can play it through that. And just as a really quick, it's just a 15-minute talk, but as a really quick 3-minute summary, what we do is we actually the OKRs are the framework by which we set the business objectives and results. The key thing is about the flow metrics is they're actually, we've been doing OKRs at Tasktop for over this is our 8th year now. And it's an activity I lead, it's an activity I find really effective, but only if it manages technology objectives and key results with business ones, right? Because key OKRs for us this year, for example, are flow efficiency, right? Is improving flow efficiency across value streams, so that we're scaling better as we're hiring and the like. So I think they're highly complementary. And again, the key thing about the flow metrics is that they're a leading indicator for your business metrics. So just basically, check out that talk for more information, but just use the flow metrics as a way to help, again, provide a balance to the business metrics with just a much faster feedback cycle. because within a sprint or two, you can see, did we improve flow? Did we fix that dependency, or did things slow down? You won't see that from a business metric like revenue, right? So I think they're designed to dovetail. And then again, I think the key thing is always have flow metrics as part of your top level company OKRs, as well as specific value stream or functional OKRs as well. And I go through an example in that talk. So thanks everyone. Thanks for the great questions.